Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Afternoon. Oh, Sylvia, you made it. Great.
I made it. Thank
Oh,
you.
wonderful. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Valerie.
So I'm Anel and I'm doing the Zoom management. So I just have to check if all the translators and speakers are here. So for the translation, I have Surya Thiebo. Is it here? No. Hector, okay, I can just.
Hi.
Okay, you are already on your channel. Perfect. Thank you. Giovanna Cuillo. Giovanna Nogovia. Okay. And for the speakers, also Gabriel Fernandez, I make you co-host.
Yeah.
Then Olivier de Schutter. He's
He
not
will
here.
be coming in late.
Okay. Valerie Schmidt. Okay, co-host. Up. Dolline Bussolo. Not here. Aura Sevilla. Yeah, I see.
I'm here.
Okay, great.
Co-host, super. And Omar Faruk Osman. Sorry for the pronunciation. Fancy method. So for the translation, now I just have Hector Milano, so Surya Thibault, Nicolas Rigel, and Giovanna. Not here. So I'm just going to wait. For the speakers, do I have to share some PowerPoints or do you share it?
Here is Dolline.
Okay, I'm going to share mine.
If you can share mine, that's great for me because
Okay, just tell me which one is it and then.
Valerie Schmidt.
Yes, but which PowerPoint? I mean.
Well, I sent only one.
Okay.
In the name of the PowerPoint, there is my name.
Okay.
And it will be the first presentation.
Okay. Nicola, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, super. Hector, can you hear me on this channel? I can't hear you, Hector. Can you try it again, please? Yes, now it's okay. Thank you. And now on this channel, can you speak? I don't know if it's the other Nicola. On the French channel, I can't hear you.
Are you talking to me?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'm not. Yeah, you haven't assigned me any channel so far.
Okay, so it's the English channel that
English and French.
Okay, yeah. you make both.
Yeah, English
okay.
and French. Yeah, and my colleague is joining in like in a few seconds.
Okay, super.
Surya. Yeah, she'll be joining the meeting in a few seconds.
Yes, here I am.
Okay, on which channel are you?
None yet, I think.
Can you go on a channel?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great.
And on this channel, is it you or Nicolas?
We're both on the English and French channel.
Okay, you okay.
Yeah.
Okay, super. And for the speakers, so
So to confirm, we have translation for French and Spanish, right? French, Spanish, and English.
yes,
Okay, great. Just want to confirm that.
yes, yes.
Yes.
Are all the speakers co-host now? Omar, is he here?
No, not yet. He's on. Yeah.
Aura,
And,
Sevilla, I already did. No, maybe not. Are you co-host, Aura?
I'm just checking.
should be co-host to be Sylvia.
Not yet.
Well, if you mean by co-host,
I have. I'm good now.
possibility to share slides and things, I'm not sure if that's sensible because I've got quite an unstable internet connection.
Now
But
you
I will
are.
be here throughout.
Okay.
And I've just sent an email to Omar with the link
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
if he's having trouble.
Okay. And now are all the speakers co-host to share the screen?
Okay, great. Yes.
Yes. Can I just quickly try mine?
I can't hear you well. Can you repeat it, please?
Okay. I think I need to play. Can you hear well my audio?
No, there is an echo.
Okay.
And Valerie Schmidt, the PowerPoint you want, is it also I have investing more.
Mhm.
Okay, this is okay, super.
Investing
I
more
have
and
it.
better in universal social protection.
Yep, super.
Thank you. It's just because I'm very bad at sharing my screen sometimes.
Yeah, no problem really.
And things like that. So
Join the club.
that's okay, but sometimes it's not okay.
The club is pretty large, I can assure you. Okay, wonderful.
Before the start of the meeting, please don't forget to put us in the booths. To put the interpreters in the booth. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was already good.
No. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not in any booth.
Right.
I don't know if other interpreters are, but I'm not. And may I ask you if there is anyone presenting in French today?
Actually, I don't know. Gabriel, do you know?
No, there isn't.
Okay. Yeah.
I can respond in French to questions in French,
Okay.
if you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, sure. We could provide you with interpretation from French to English, but I don't know if French to Spanish will be possible. I'm not sure about it. If my colleague responsible for interpretation into Spanish also has French in his language combination, that may be possible, but I don't know if French to Spanish will be possible.
We can't hear you, Hector.
say that interpretation from French into Spanish is a bit limited. So if we could try and not use French that often, that would be great. But if absolutely necessary, I can cover it.
And Nicola, now I think you are on the channel. Can you confirm it, please?
I'm not in any channel.
What?
Okay.
Is it okay? Okay. So,
Okay, and great. Omar is in. Welcome, Omar.
Hi.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So great. So we have the full cast now, minus Olivier, who will be joining us later, hopefully, before the end of the session.
Hello, can I just check if you can hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Faintly, faintly.
Not very loud.
Okay, I'm trying with. Good to see you, Valerie, and also Sylvia.
Very nice. We can't hear you very well, Auda. Hi, Rose.
Hi.
Hi, Rose.
Is everything okay? Are you starting the session now?
Yes, Rose,
Yes.
I can WhatsApp you if I need. But I think everything is okay now.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Here's
Thank you.
Ingo. Hi, Ingo.
Yeah.
Hi, Celia. Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Hi,
Have a good
Ingo.
session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me know.
Yep. We can start.
I think.
It's 3 minutes past the time.
Yeah. So shall we start?
Yes, go.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, great. So welcome to this side event on social protection and austerity. We shall present evidence on why the universal right to social protection is crucial to the success of the 2030 agenda, how social protection can prevent long-term poverty traps, as well as a result of the ongoing crisis, contribute to future crisis preparedness, and in reducing inequalities. And finally, why efforts to introduce austerity program must be resisted. We have amongst us a number of very professional, experienced social protection specialists, and also more importantly, the voices from the civil society, stakeholders in the community will also be part of this process. But before I introduce the speakers, let me first of all introduce myself. I will be your moderator. My name is Gabriel Fernandez. Let me also very briefly share a few housekeeping rules. For those who will be speaking, please speak slowly and into the mics to facilitate the translators' work. There'll be translation, as you saw already, French, English, and Spanish. We will have, if you have any questions, please share that in the chat box, and that we'll have someone to be able to respond to them. So let me begin by saying again, welcome to everyone to this session, and to introduce our first speaker, Valerie Schmidt, who is no stranger to many of us in the social protection world, and is a key player also at the development international arena. Valerie Schmidt is the Deputy Director of Social Protection Department at the ILO headquarters in Geneva. She's also a leading ILO flagship program. She leads an ILO flagship program on building social protection flows for all. She has 20 years of progressively responsible professional experience in the field of social protection, combining both headquarters and field experience in various types of organization in the ILO, both in Africa and in Asia, as well as experience in the corporate sector in France and NGO in Africa. Her academic achievement includes philosophy from University of Sorbonne in Paris, and a Master's of Business Administration with honors, which is the Europe's highest ranked MBA program by the Financial Times. So impeccable credential. And so we're very honored to have her. And she will be making the first presentation and framing the discussion for us. Valerie, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much, Gabriel, and thanks for giving me the floor first. I hope I will be up to your expectations. So my idea was to present, to give a few points around the right to social protection, the fact that social protection is not yet a reality, and the need to invest more and better in social protection. So yeah, this is supposed to be my first slide. It looks nicer on my screen, but I think this is the ILO template, which is a bit strange. So yeah, the title is Investing More and Better in Universal Social Protection. Next slide. Next slide, please.
Yeah, sorry.
So these are the following points I want to make. First, that social protection is a human right and an economic necessity. Second, that social protection is not yet a reality for 53%, even more than 53% of the world's population. That COVID-19, as all of you know, has been or is a wake-up call. I will also try to explain what we mean by universal social protection. There are many definitions around, but one definition has been adopted at the International Labour Conference this year, so maybe it's the, at least it's the latest one. Then to see to what extent achieving universal social protection is possible. Obviously, it will require additional investments in social protection. And when we are talking about investments, we are not only talking about more investments, but also better investments. And I will try to explain the difference. And then looking forward, because we had an international labor conference this year, discussing mainly about the topic of social protection. So we have a few conclusions that will support our work in the coming years. So social protection is a human right, as all of you know. It's recognized in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's also recognized as such in many national constitutions and laws. What is interesting with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is that there are two articles that refer to the right to social security, Article 22, which also recognize that it's the responsibility of national effort, but also international cooperation. So here we are. So it's really, this is the idea of not only states' responsibility, but there is also a sort of international responsibility to ensure that all countries establish or implement this right. Article 25 is equally important because it mentions the importance of income security and adequate standard of living, and lists a number of risks that people may face and where they will be in need of social protection. What is interesting, when we go out of the crisis, we see that unemployment is listed as the first risk. So, I mean, in the list. Huh? So it's interesting because today, due to COVID-19, unemployment protection is really high on the agenda. Next slide, please. So social protection is a human right, but it's also an economic necessity. I mean, we have tons of evidence. This is a very nice graph that shows the correlation between higher levels of social protection expenditure and lower levels of poverty. But social protection also contributes to many other development objectives. It reduces inequality. This is why it's associated with SDG 10 on reducing inequality. It also supports access to healthcare, education. If well designed, it can contribute to gender equality, and this is SDG 5. It contributes also to a just transition to greener economies. For instance, if you provide unemployment benefits and cash transfers to people while the country is transitioning to a green economy, you can facilitate this transition because obviously they will have income support during the transition. It's also an enabler for the transition to the formal economy, and we all know that, and this is why we are all around this table as well, because we are all committed to supporting the extension of social protection to all workers in the informal economy and their families. So there are many, I mean, it's a contributors to many development objectives. And we saw with the crisis that it's also a necessary building block for countries to be able to respond to disasters, to epidemics, to large covariant shocks. Next slide, please. So we are all convinced of the bien fondé of social protection. However, it's still not a reality for 53.1% of the world's population. This is the latest estimate of our World Social Protection database. We have just issued the World Social Protection Report in September. So in case you haven't seen it, it's time to go to our website and to find it, which includes statistics at the global level, per region, per country, and per branch of social security. What is the situation of social security for children, for the working age, for mothers, etc., etc. The worst off are the population in Africa, because this is the continent, the region where social protection exclusion is the most. Next slide, please. So COVID-19 has been a wake-up call. It has shown the importance of social protection. So if some politicians or policy leaders who are still asleep walking today, I think they are really conscious of the importance of building social protection systems. During the crisis, there has been a massive influx of social protection emergency measures. We have listed 1,700 measures taken within 18 months in over 200 countries. But beyond the message that social protection is important, I think the crisis has also shown that countries that had already robust social protection systems in place were more able to respond to the urgent need for cash transfers, unemployment benefits, healthcare. So clearly COVID-19 has shown that we need to build robust systems to meet not only today's social protection needs, but also to be better prepared for tomorrow's challenges. Next slide, please. So what is universal social protection? So there are several definitions floating around. There is one from the USP 2030, which is actually largely based on the social protection floor's recommendation that was adopted in 2012. So the universal social protection is first ensuring that all residents, all children in a given country have access to essential healthcare and income security across their life cycles. So what does it mean, income security across the life cycle? It means that as a child, all children should enjoy income security, so enough income to be able to have proper nutrition, education, care, and any other necessary goods and services. So concretely, social protection floor for children means family allowances, it means scholarships, it means school feeding programs. This is the type of benefits or services that can help realize the social protection floor for children. For the working age, similarly, income security means that in case of unemployment, you get benefits. In case of maternity, you can go on leave and this leave is paid. In case of injury, disability, you get a pension, etc. And income security in the old age means that you should receive a pension. And more countries are also talking about access to long-term care services. So the social protection floor, it's a set of guarantees that should be there for everybody across their lives. So this is like an ambition, if you want. How do you realize how do you implement the social protection floor? There are many ways, and we will see some examples, but the idea is really that you have this ambition, you have this guarantee in mind, and it's really results oriented. Next slide. So now, what is universal social protection as it is framed today? In the discussion in June 2021 at the International Labour Conference, so a discussion on social security, it's the first time that the member states of the ILO have adopted a definition on universal social protection. So universal social protection is first universal, it means for everybody. Second, it means comprehensive. Here it's the same idea as for the social protection floor, it's the life cycle. It means that you should get social protection across your lives, not only when you are old, not only when you're a child, not only when you are a lactating mother, but you should be able to rely on social protection at any point in time in your life, because you can face many different risks across your lives. Adequate, it means that the level of the benefits should allow a life in dignity. So we don't want very minimum and basic levels of benefits. We want to ensure that social protection systems remove people from poverty, and in case of contributory schemes, that they replace a certain percentage of the past income of the person. Fourth adjective, sustainable. Here it's very important that social protection systems, to be able to protect people, they need to be sustainable. When we are talking about sustainability, of course, we all have in mind the financial sustainability, but there are also other components of sustainability. Governance, good management, administration is very important as well. And we also talk a lot about social sustainability, the fact that social protection systems are based on a national dialogue, on a tripartite social dialogue that are based on consensus. This increases the social sustainability of social protection systems. And last adjective is adapted. Adapted, what it means that social protection systems, they need to, of course, to evolve so that they can always be relevant, always be adapted to the new challenges. We have talked about long-term care. This is clearly a new risk that's in Asia or in other parts, in North Africa, in Europe, obviously. We know about this risk for some years already, but this is clearly a new branch of social security that is emerging. So the systems need to adapt to this change, which is here, it's the demographic change, but there are also other risks such as climate related, obviously. Achieving universal social protection is possible, and many countries have shown it. So this is the cover of a compendium of country cases, which gives you concrete examples. In 3-4 pages, you can learn about all these examples and many others. Next slide. However, to achieve universal social protection, more investments are needed. So we have done a study in 2020, which shows that to achieve at least the social protection floor, which includes access to healthcare and income security across the life cycle, developing countries will need to invest more at about 3.8% of their GDP. So they need to add this amount, this percentage of GDP, if they want to achieve the social protection floor. For some, of course, this is an average. For sub-Saharan African countries who invest today 5.6% of their GDP, they should add 8.2 additional points of GDP. So they should multiply by 2.5 their current investment. So for some countries, it's a big investment that is required, but for some others, it will be marginal in percentage of GDP. So to invest more in social protection, it is feasible. There are many available options. Our previous director, Isabel Ortiz, had published a fiscal space handbook that gives all these options with tons of examples. So there is, of course, increasing tax revenues, reallocating public expenditure, eliminating illicit financial flows. And some very important and promising area is obviously the expansion of social protection to workers in the informal economy through contributory or partially contributory schemes in particular. For some low-income countries, we know already that if we want to achieve the social protection floor by 2030, it will be very difficult without additional support from the international community. So they really need additional financial resources to complement and support their national efforts. And so there are tons of discussions, and I'm sure Olivier will also share some information with us about that on how to increase ODA, not only to finance technical cooperation, but to also increase the resources, so the financing for social protection. And this can happen, for instance, through budget support. There are also discussions on how to use special drawing rights that are made available to facilitate the recovery for the social sector, for social protection. So there are many discussions on this. For the time being, what is clear is that any additional financial assistance needs to be very connected to the country's efforts to mobilize its domestic resources. Next slide. So we are talking a lot about we need more money, we need to invest more, etc. But at the ILO, what we say is that we also need to invest better. What do we mean by that? We mean that countries should always ensure that their national social protection system is based on tripartite social dialogue. This is super important if we want a long-term investment, that there is a consensus at national level on the policy priorities. We also mean that social protection systems are based on solidarity. There are a mechanism or set of mechanisms to redistribute income and wealth. And we should never forget that. When we invest in social protection, we should invest in social protection systems that foster this solidarity, that use the redistribution mechanism. So it is out of the question to establish, for instance, individual savings accounts that have no solidarity component. And as I said already, when we talk about investing better, we also talk about ensuring that the systems are financially sustainable, that they are well governed, well managed, administered, so that it also creates more trust of the general public in their national social protection systems. Next slide. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, thank you. At the International Labour Conference this year, what was decided is that the ILO member states, so 187 member states represented by their governments, their workers, and the employers' organizations, should invest more in universal social protection and build robust systems. And to achieve that, there are many means of action, including using more systematically social security standards, and there will be a ratification campaign of Convention 102 and other standards. There is also our flagship program that is here that will launch. We will launch a second phase on the 7th of October to really support more countries in investing in their social protection systems. And there is also an increased role that the ILO has to play in the multilateral system and in discussions with UN and with international financial institutions, including exploring global financing mechanisms that could help low-income countries in investing more in their social protection systems. Next slide. So today we are at the crossroads, and this is a very interesting analysis that is made in our World Social Protection report that I invite all of you to read. At the crossroads between a low road strategy and a high road strategy. And the high road is really about investing in robust and universal social protection systems, whereas the low road is business as usual. We continue with our little investments, and and things will not, of course, improve in the future. So I think there is the COVID-19 has opened an opportunity to a sort of policy window for countries that can make today a change, a radical change in their developments, and we really hope that many of them will take the high road path. I think it's finished, the presentation. So thank you so much. And I'm here, of course, for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, for this wonderful, comprehensive presentation. And of course, as usual, you did not disappoint us. So many rich information, highly difficult to capture all that in a few words. But I think some of the key messages is that, first of all, you highlight to us that what is universal social protection, and I think that was very important, especially the adjective, an example, and which is very important, that it is achievable. And I think that's a key message that we will definitely keep in mind. You've demonstrated the evidence that it is also affordable and how we can actually go about doing it. But more importantly, that in spite of all that, they will still need additional financial support. And financial support, not only in terms of the finance itself, but also the technical component of making the finances or the fiscal space available for the social protection system to be more robust. And then especially in the light of the many shocks that we're receiving, also shock responsive. And as part of ending your message, you said the key message, it is important to invest better. And I think that's a message that we take with us, but not only invest better, but also taking the high road in investing better. So on that note, I will now turn to the next speaker, because in your intervention, you mentioned that universal social protection is only possible when coverage includes everybody, including the informal sector. And we happen to have amongst our panelists, someone who represents the voice of the informal sector. So I will now call on Ara Sevilla, and let me quickly just introduce her. So please feel free to put all your questions in the chat box, and later on at the end of the session, with all the presentation, we'll give the speakers an opportunity to be able to respond to your questions. So Ara Sevilla is the WIEGO focal person in Southeast Asia and oldest worker. She is a development worker, a feminist, older people's rights advocate, and social protection specialist. She works in improving aging and social protection policies, gathering evidence, providing technical advice to the government, networking, and building the capacity of older people and workers in the informal economy to affect institutional change, both at the national and regional level. She specializes in gender responsive and life course approaches to social protection, and in the intersection of gender, aging, and informal employment. Currently, Ara is working part-time as the focal person in the Southeast Asia and older workers of, so WIEGO, which stands for Workers of Women in Informal Employment and globalizing and organizing. So on that, may I please ask Ara to please make her presentation, and you have 8 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, and thank you as well to Valerie for that great presentation. So it's difficult to match that energy and also, but I will try. So thank you again for inviting WIEGO to be part of this side event. So just to present to you, so I will be talking about social protection for informal workers. Particularly, I would like to share the study that we did during the COVID-19, the impact of COVID-19 to informal workers, but I will also be focusing with older informal workers and highlight some gaps on social protection for informal workers, and finally some recommendations that we are putting forward to extend social protection to informal workers. So some of these are mentioned by Valerie, but I will just make some, I will just highlight them. So first and foremost, I would like to share this quote, this story from Siobhan, who is a member of the home-based worker in Cape Town. So she said that we spent 8 weeks at home with no orders. From being very busy, we went to having nothing. So for home workers like Siobhan, who rely on sewing orders from subcontractors to survive, the COVID-19 crisis brought a sudden halt to orders. So with no relief from the government, she had to find ways to survive. So this is a dilemma that many informal workers has faced during the crisis. So globally, informal employment accounts for 60% of the global employment, representing roughly around 2 billion workers and 90% of the employment in developing countries. So WIEGO did a longitudinal study that assesses the impact of COVID-19 on specific occupational groups like home-based workers, domestic workers, also street vendors, and waste pickers. So these are some of the findings from our study, but I will be focusing with older informal workers. So, so some of the impacts that we've seen based on the study is, first, it's really apparent from the study that the impact on earnings from informal workers was as dire as projected by the ILO and other observers. For example, the average earnings in April were only 21% of pre-COVID earnings, and 75% of respondents reported zero earnings. Even when most severe restrictions had been lifted in mid-2020, the average earnings were still only at 55% of their pre-COVID earnings. Another second finding that we in the study is that different sectors are also differently affected, and these are strongly influence how the COVID-19 crisis impact workers. For example, among domestic workers, those who are lived out workers are more likely to face unemployment, while live-in workers suffer deteriorating working conditions in terms of employment. And another thing that I'd like to highlight as well is the gender dynamics of the impact, wherein we've seen that the results, it confirms the disproportionate impact on women's workers' livelihood. This includes earning losses in April and mid-year were greater for women than for men, regardless of the sector in employment. And then other results are also here, but those are just I would like to highlight. But despite all of that, the membership-based organization played a crucial role in providing support for workers in mitigating the economic, physical, and mental health impacts of COVID-19. So as to the older informal workers, so the pandemic has put a spotlight on older persons who are the most vulnerable to the virus. So even before the pandemic, older informal workers are already vulnerable to poverty, poor health, and decent work deficit. But this has been highlighted during the pandemic when the COVID hit, based on our study, it shows that the earnings of informal workers fell to a greater extent than those of their younger counterparts. And we've seen as well that their income recovery has been slower than the younger counterparts. There's also a strong likelihood that this is because older workers reduce their working days more than younger workers, because there are also some age-specific movement restrictions. For example, in the Philippines, those who are 60 years old and above are not allowed to go out, or they are just at a stay-at-home orders. So they cannot do, in the initial phase of the pandemic, they cannot do any economic activities than the younger workers. So there are also, another reason is also the limited decline of the work opportunities for older persons as a result of COVID-19. So, and also the older workers, we've seen that if they have low access to personal protective equipment, in fact, they have to finance this by themselves. But on the good side, or on the other hand, we've noted that in countries where there's social pension in place, they were often able to receive timely income support during the crisis. So we've seen how important it is, the role of social protection, even prior to the crisis. So what are the main issues of informal workers? In general, they have very limited social protection coverage and also services that they can avail. And this is mainly because of what we call the missing middle in social protection. So why are informal workers the missing middle? First, they are not considered to be poor enough to benefit from cash transfers targeted at the extreme poor, often in rural areas like safety net programs. Second, they are not eligible for cash transfers targeted at children and also older persons. Third, their incomes are too low and irregular to contribute to the social insurance schemes. And lastly, they are also legally excluded from social insurance schemes. So these are some of the barriers or that prevents informal workers in joining the social protection system or in being part of the social protection system. So just part of the theme of this side event is that we are also joining the call to stop promoting austerity measures in the COVID-19 recovery period. And in fact, we have a number of recommendations on how we can extend social protection to informal workers, which includes the following. So we have 7 call to actions, but I will just be focusing on 1 and 2, and also the 7th one. First, we think, like Valerie has mentioned, this is an opportunity. So we need to invest to connect the workers to social protection and healthcare and childcare. And these investments are integral to economic recovery. I just would like to highlight this, that we also support the call for Global Fund for Social Protection, which high-income countries and international financial institutions can fund, which can help lowest income countries pay for their citizens to have a minimum level of income security throughout their lives. Another also that we are promoting among this call is also for the brands to contribute. For example, for home-based workers, if the global brands can contribute to a common pool of funds to support home workers and other informal workers in their value chain, like for those who also in the waste pickers. So that's also what we are calling for. So you can access this. I can give the link to this call, for work, call to actions in the link box later. But finally, just on my last slide, what are specific calls for older informal workers? 2 things. One, we need really to guarantee income security for older people by implementing universal non-contributory social pension. Why social pension? This will give minimal survival benefit among older informal workers. It can help mitigate, withstand, and also recover from crisis in the future, and may provide them with more choice whether they continue working or at what intensity. Second is really to tackle decent work in older age by ensuring that labor market policies include older workers, combat age discrimination in the world of work. This is a strong relevance in improving their livelihood of older workers in terms of providing greater opportunities and enabling them to have the right to choose to work. So just on last, investment in social protection and labor protections are needed for economic recovery. As national governments, global institutions, and corporations consider economic recovery from COVID-19, they must consider how to support the recovery of the 2 billion people around the world working in the informal economy. So that's all, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Yara, very much for highlighting the importance of the missing middle that we've heard so much about, and so correctly you've highlighted the importance that amongst the informal, you also have the elderly that makes up. But thank you for reminding us of the importance of the Global Fund for Social Protection and the call that we all have in rallying around making sure that it becomes reality, because this mechanism can actually help us to achieve the universal social protection. And the call from the informal workers, we've taken note of that. Thank you very much. And if you can maybe put it in the chat, so it can be part of a mobilization effort beyond this conference. I think that would be a good idea. So thank you very much for that. And especially ending on the note that for a full recovery from post-COVID, indeed, we will actually need to ensure that the informal workers and the missing middle are part of the social protection system that we're talking about in the next wave. Thank you very much. And so now at this point, I would like to call on our next panelist, who comes from the trade unionist. His name is Omar. He's from Somalia. His full name is Omar Faruk Osman. So we're very happy to have him. Omar is a Somali journalist, trade unionist, and press freedom advocate, who is the General Secretary of the Federation of Somali Trade Union, and has been the authoritative and strong voice that defends trade union rights, labor rights, medium freedom, and rights of workers in Somalia. Currently, he's also the Secretary General of the National Union of Somali Journalists. He also sits in the Executive Committee of the International Federation of Journalists, where he was elected at the World Congress in Tunis recently for a term of 3 years. So give him the floor, let me also congratulate him on that achievement. So Omar, the floor is yours, and you also have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Gabriel and colleagues who have invited me for this important discussions on presenting the situation of social protection in Somalia. Before I do that, it is also important to paint the socio-economic picture of my country, Somalia, into which social protection policies and programs are or will be implemented. As you may know, Somalia is one of the poorest countries in the world. According to the United Nations Development Program, Somalia has a poverty rate of 73%, meaning 7 out of 10 people are poor, with youth unemployment rate at a staggering 67%. Similarly, studies by the World Bank show that almost 9 out of 10 Somali households in 2019 were deprived in at least one basic human need: money, electricity, education, or water and sanitation. Children under the age of 14 represent nearly half of the Somali population. 73% of these children are poor. While an adult may be able to extract him or herself out of poverty, eventually falling into poverty in childhood has lifelong consequences. In addition, Somali communities across the country have been shattered by decades of conflict. Civic institutions remain weak, peace and security remain fragile in the wake of terrorist attacks, and human rights are grossly violated. Somali households depend largely on aid and remittances. When we observe Somalia within the context of COVID-19, we see that the above social and economic challenges have deepened. As in the case of most countries, the COVID-19 pandemic has had far-reaching economic impacts in the country, including business performance, limiting livestock exports, trade taxes, and remittances. Household income were reduced and many workers were forced to take on alternative or additional work. This has all had a direct impact on working families who had already been struggling to make ends meet. In addition to the economic burden brought on by COVID-19, the past 12 months brought with it a number of climate-related challenges. Erratic weather patterns, climate shocks have led to prolonged and severe drought conditions and flooding displaced 919,000 people in 2020 and destroyed essential infrastructure, property, and 144,000 hectares of agricultural land. At the same time, Somalia also experienced the worst locust infestation in 25 years, with tens of thousands of hectares of cropland and pasture damaged, creating a devastating blow for agricultural communities and pastoralities. All of this has contributed to reducing Somalia's growth forecast for 2020 from 3.2% to a 2.5%. This then had a shock on effect on economic profitability, jobs decline, household incomes, and well-being among individuals in Somalia. The above picture provides strong arguments for social protection program. It's encouraging that Somalia has made some progress towards making social protection a reality in the country. Somalia's social protection policy was launched in 2019. This framework was developed after wide consultation with a variety of stakeholders, including us, the trade unionists. The policy states that social protection may include developing and implementing a wages and remuneration policy and an appropriate minimum wage system, strengthening social security provisions for the working population, and establishing a system of cash transfers for the most vulnerable. To respond to the strain that COVID-19 placed in Somalia, the government, with the support of development partners, including World Bank, expanded the safety net programs to caution in the most vulnerable households. There were efforts to help scale health sector and livelihood financing, specifically supporting the design and launch of cash transfer programs, or Bahnano as it is known in Somalia. Since Somalia's social realities require a humanitarian response, social protection represents an approach that can bridge short-term humanitarian interventions and long-term development objectives. Humanitarian and social protection objectives and related activities, such as the use for cash transfers. Humanitarian principles call for neutrality, impartiality, and independence from government. Social protection aims to strengthen state structures for social objectives, poverty reduction, resilience, and human development. When we investigate the levels of poverty, inequality, unemployment, and vulnerability in Somalia, it is clear that a social protection strategy will make a strategic and sustainable impact and allow Somali people to live decent and dignified lives. This in turn facilitates their social, political, and economic participation in society. Somalia's social protection policy envisions strengthening all components of a social protection system, including linking with the development of a single registry and the long-awaited national IDs. It advocates for beginning with transitional safety nets, then transitioning to the social protection floor as and when the evidence base is built. As the policy must involve an array of actors in our country to be implemented effectively, collaboration across a host of actors to achieve the maximum impact is important, ensuring the participation of the private sector to develop products that encourage the participation of the informal sector, including informal sector workers, and reduce transfer risks from the poorest households is also critical. Social protection would mean that Somali people could look forward to a dependable form of financial support as they withstand one, some, or all these social, economic, and security challenges. It provides a much needed safety net for Somalis to address their basic individual and family needs, thereby allowing them to be active participants in their long-term development and in the country's 21st century vision of its future. Social protection also holds an important function as the basis of national trust. This is incredibly important since Somalia has survived many decades of conflict, corruption, and isolation, factors which arguably allows deep distrust of the government and lack of belief that the well-being of Somalis really is at the heart of government. Finally, the last decade towards 2030 and to progress towards the sustainable development goals began with a devastating health pandemic. This has naturally interrupted progress towards the goals, including SDG 1, Target 1.3, to implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including florists, and by 2030 achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. We must double, even triple our efforts to make good progress on this goal and support vulnerable groups towards decent, safe, and meaningful lives. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Omar, for that presentation and for sharing Somalia's rich experience in social protection and reminding us about the important link or the important role that social protection can play in mitigating climate change and building resilience. And I think this is a very topical issue. Thank you for bringing that out to us. And secondly, the importance of system building. Having a registry so critical. We saw that in the COVID-19, that was identification of vulnerable population was a key element in terms of being able to provide social transfer. So thank you for reminding us about all this, and wish you again well in your newer assignment that you just have taken. So thank you very much. We are approaching time, but we have one more panelist because we want to give time for those who have questions or clarification to this very rich presentation. So I will call on the last speaker, certainly not least, and this is Dolline Bussolo. Dolline is a freelance consultant in health and social protection activist. She trained as a nutritionist and worked with the Kenyan Agricultural Research Organization. At the regional level, she has worked with Help Age International in various capacities, culminating in her appointment as the Regional Rights Entitlement and Health Coordinator for the Africa region. She is currently chairing a church-based social protection program, that relief program, a cash transfer, where registered members affected by various calamities, sickness, COVID-19 receive funds to cushion them against and help them to transition to recovery to improve their livelihood. So on that introduction, you also have 8 minutes. So Dolline, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. As you've heard, my name is Dolline. I have worked as a regional coordinator and also helped implement several social protection programs in Africa. Instead of giving just a general overview, I just want to share the experience. I think the experience for me really tells a lot. So I'll share 3 experiences on how we have used a rights approach to support social protection and social protection to support the hard to reach people. So I just begin with the truth is that to access health or to help communities access health, the hard to reach people, we really need to understand what is the underlying problem. So I'll give an example of where the underlying problem was discrimination due to witchcraft accusation. This program was held in in Burkina Faso. And we can be able to see that witchcraft is already a harmful practice. So even if we are thinking about health, these are people who are unlikely to be targeted. They are unlikely to even have the cards to be able to go and access, to even know about the entitlements. So the intervention here will be a lot. It must, first of all, have a livelihood component, which will help the people to be accepted in the community, to become visible. And we're also talking about people who are illiterate at the same time. These are the hard to reach people. So it is important to be able to carry out a research to find out what are the underlying problems. Even if you're going to do an intervention in health, it's good to be able to also address the underlying problem. Otherwise, it will not be sustainable. That is at least a lesson that I learned. And one of the things that we need to do is to act at various levels. And to act at these various levels, of course, we need funding. You need a system which enables the hard to reach people to be able to be heard, including participation in human rights, universal periodic reviews. So we participated in that, where we're writing and saying, look at the women, the children, a marginalized group. So how can we be able to reach them with a social protection or even health? So we had to address all of those things in tandem, and it involved quite a number of people. So definitely good research and understanding what really makes the difference. Like in Burkina, actually, the intervention was on water, because water and sanitation were big problems there. So here we are targeting to improve the health and livelihood of the people, and also to improve their accusation due to witchcraft. But we used a health strategy to be able to address a harmful practice. So I think it's very important to be analytical in terms of social protection. What is it really meeting? Sometimes it may be direct. Sometimes you need to address an issue that is causing the problem. In Ghana, we had a good problem there, where we were looking at, of course, Ghanaians have a national insurance, hospital insurance, and it was particularly for the whole country, community, especially, but now we are focusing on older people. In this case, the main problems were the structural barriers and lack of information. So the entitlement was there, people were not aware of it, and there were no structures. So now we're looking, again, when you look at access to healthcare, you are saying, yes, entitlement is there, but do they know that the entitlement is there? Do they have the documentation? Can they be able to confront the government? So one thing that was critical there, again, we needed to have, to support the community to have a voice, monitor how many of them are actually accessing this particular healthcare, and then document this. And then also using international days, specific days, lobby. And when you're lobbying, you really need to develop very clear, okay, you have given us the health entitlement, but when we go to the health facilities, we're not getting the medicine. The only medication is there is, let's say, paracetamol, but there is no medicine now for non-communicable diseases, So they are very subtle, hard, health-specific health morbidities which need to be addressed through advocacy. This is a right now to health. And lastly, I just want to share a good practice now in Nigeria, which I also heard about, where people who had already been funded, who are getting cash transfer, realized their problem. Mainly it was actually childbearing women, and they had a very high mortality rate for infant mortality, and they were very far in a very remote area, no infrastructure. So what did they decide to do? They decided now to use the cash that they were getting to make a contribution to buy an ambulance for themselves. So we can see also now with that, the member of parliament to also now scale it up. And now with that, they are now able to go to hospital with no major ado. Now, we can see that it is very important when we are looking at health or health as entitlement to use a rights-based approach. Otherwise, it becomes, it will not be sustainable. But so we see now there's a role for the CSOs here. The CSOs, we as a CSO, we have a role to support structural barriers and discrimination. Even though it might be health that we are looking at, we have to see what is it that we need to be able to address in order to achieve what the social protection entitlement is supposed to achieve, for instance. And then we also have to try now as CSO to work at a higher level in terms of participation in policy planning, scaling up of the good practice, documentation of good practice, which can be evidence for government and other people to learn from. We need data, we need research on a regular basis to be able to say, okay, so even if it's scaling up, what are we going to do? Or are there some, for groups, if we need some groups to be in scaling up, we need, for instance, to say we need to include such and such a group. What is the evidence? What is a good practice? All of that, we need to do that as well. And then also strengthen community monitoring and evaluation processes so that they can see it is our thing. This is really meant to increase ownership. And lastly, I would recommend that we also work with the private sector, because it is a private sector now, for instance, that is giving out the cash transfers that are given most of the countries, including Kenya. And so it is important that also their capacity is built so that they can be able to engage with the government. And for 6 months, you find even the payment is not coming. So now what do they do? When the payment is not coming, it's important for CSOs also to increasingly work with the private sector so that it is seen as a unit and not just fragmented work. So it's a whole system. And so there are so many gaps. And in order for us to achieve and say we have been able to achieve, there are so many gaps that we need to analyze and say, so in addition to this, what else do we need to do? Health, you can't have health without a livelihood support, because the doctor tells you, take this medicine after food or before food. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dolline, for that presentation, and especially for highlighting the importance of the right to health, which COVID-19 has clearly highlighted for us, and sharing with us very practical, on-the-ground stories of some of the challenges that communities face in terms of accessing social protection, and highlighting the role of civil society, critical. And just like Omar, highlighted also the importance of the collaboration and the role that the private sector can play in making universal social protection a reality for all. So thank you very much for that intervention. We had hoped by now that Professor De Schutter would have joined us, but unfortunately he hasn't. Professor De Schutter was going to speak to us more about the Global Fund for Social Protection. In the absence of Professor De Schutter, I wonder if Nicola or Sylvia or Koen could say a few words before I open up for Q&A. Sylvia,
hi.
Yourself or
others.
Who would like to take the floor on that?
Well, I can't see Nicola come in or Koen. I can say a few words on it. Thank you, Gabriel. Just to say that for those who don't know, I'm sure you all may do know, but if you don't, there is a call, a global call for the social protection floor, which is out there. the Coalition for Social Protection Floors, which has hosted this meeting, and in which the Africa Platform for Social Protection, of which Gabriel and I collaborate, as well as Dolline as board member, and others on this meeting, we've sort of put this call together, and it's got over 100 civil society organizations backing it. And if Anna, I think, is on the call, could put the link in the chat, people could go straight to the website and have a look at it, and please join the call. But I don't want to say anything about the current state of negotiations, because Professor de Schutter would have done so. But basically, the call is that a fund be established, which is actually a technical as well as a financial mechanism to support countries to put their social protection on the high road. I really like that idea, Valerie, taking it off the low road, but onto the high road, to make the universal right to social protection and the floor be a reality before 2030. And this requires collaboration, which is not only financing from the north to the south, but it requires solidarity between the south and the north, and the south and the south, and the south to the north, because there are different ways to implement social protection floors. And so it's very important, I think, that we understand that it is not just another financing mechanism to impose conditions on countries which receive it, but it's a way to pull together so that we have a really viable proposition to bridge the financing gap, which Valerie talked about, and to include the adaptability, which she also talked about, and which relates to informal workers, as well as those in work poverty of those who might not be informal workers, but can't afford their healthcare and so on. So it's a very important initiative which comes from many years standing. It's not a new one. Olivier de Schutter and was the rapporteur for the right to food before his present work, and he worked with his colleague Magdalena Sepulveda, who was a previous incumbent of the UN Rapporteur for hunger and extreme poverty. So they have worked together with the ILO on these ideas, and it's just great that it's now the subject of a report which he has put together and taken to the Human Rights Council this year, and is now in discussion in a number of fora, including the L20, the G20, and obviously, as Valerie has said, the ILC. So we wanted to make sure that those of us in the Global Coalition, that those in this panel had some idea and of the potential of this fund. And as we are in the GCAP People's Assembly, we would like this to be a key sort of call, because we are not near the implementation yet. And this could be a call from this assembly to make a reality of the right to social protection for everyone. So I think I'll stop there, Gabriel, and I hope I have not spoken out of turn. It's a shame we can't have Olivier, but we'll get him another time. And if you ever get to look on the website, Google him, he is just amazing. So I really recommend it. Thank you very much. That's it.
And I can confirm that. So thank you so much, Sylvia, for sharing that for us. And so we urge you to please go and check out the information on the website on the Global Fund, a key mechanism. We have now 5 more minutes. I've been monitoring the chat, and I don't see any question as such. But before I open the floor and to give you more time to gather their thoughts, and you can either raise your question in the chat box, or you can just simply go to the reaction icon at the bottom and just raise your hand like this. And I'm sure the presenter will be more than happy to answer any question or clarify any of your concerns. So at this point, I would just maybe call on the presenters again, maybe for any last remark or key messages. Valerie, starting with yourself. You made a brilliant presentation. I see in the chat box, everybody was thrilled by it. So any key messages or last remark on your side?
Thank you, Gabriel. No, I think that's really, if we are talking about investing more and better in social protection, the action, we don't need to wait for a global fund, or the action has to start now. In many countries, it has started already. What is important, I think, is that we are really working not only on policy developments, but also always trying to connect with the financial side of it. When you are working for a social insurance mechanism, it's obvious that the board of the Social Security is looking both at the policies and how to finance them. When you are talking more about social assistance, subsidized schemes that buy the government's budget, then here you need to discuss, in addition to the normal stakeholders, with the ministries of finance. And so this is where I think we need to reinforce our positions, our role at country level, to really try to connect with the ministries of finance, to explain why social protection is an investment with a return on investment in terms of growth, in terms of GDP growth, but also in terms of human investment in people, right? And really to be part of all these discussions at national level. And in addition to that, of course, especially in countries that have limited political will, where it's difficult, to start investing massively in social protection, then it's important to use, of course, or to try to connect with allies, such as development partners, the EU, of course, the trade unions, who have a clear role to play, civil society, to ensure that this political will grows progressively. So we should not wait for a global fund to start working. This is my message. And second, I think you need to be very vigilant, because in the coming weeks, there may be good news, there may be also bad news. So we need to be really vigilant on this question of financing social protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. National ownership, critical. So can I turn Aura? Any comments?
Yes, just very quickly. Just very quickly, I just would like to highlight that informal workers should be recognized as essential workers that are very important in our recovery, and that recognition includes putting them a seat in the dialogue, like in the tripartite dialogue that was mentioned. Because most of the times it's only the formal workers who join the tripartite dialogue, but we really need the informal workers a seat there. And also what Dolline has mentioned, we need more continuous monitoring from member-based organizations in the ground. And they can really, we need to listen to them because they really know what's happening. So I do agree that we don't need, with the message of Valerie, that we don't need to wait for the Global Social Protection Fund. Currently, there's a lot of efforts already, particularly in the region, in expanding the social protection for informal workers. But that we also would like to emphasize that they should not be relying to the incomes of the informal workers. There should also be a responsibility from the government, like subsidy. Also, they're including them as well, removing the legal barriers as well for their inclusion in their social insurance system. So yes, and thank you again for having us here.
Thank you. Omar?
Yes, I think one of the most important is, as trade unionists, one thing that we have realized is we have, a legitimate role to play, and we do not need just to leave to the government or just, look at bread and butter issues alone. This is something that is seriously impacting the working families, and it's very critical to all of us. And we need to play our role and our voices to be heard. Yes, I agree. The informal economic workers should not be left. They should have a voice, and workers and trade unionists should be at the table in terms of discussing. Yes, we should not wait a global fund, and we should see what is available to be used. But at the same time, I believe that we should be speaking out. We should be demanding that, international financial institutions, the UN, development, countries should play a leading role in terms of investing the social protection, especially those of us in Africa or in developing countries that are battling with different other crises. We just see COVID, but in my country, we have been battling for 30 years with the civil war. We are battling terrorism. If I go out of this office, I don't know what will happen. If there will be a bomb, if there will be Al-Shabaab attacking us. So there are other priorities that distract our governments from doing such kind of societal, protectionism. That's why we need, ILO, international financial institutions, to work with different actors, including trade unions, because I do not want to see that, our union comrades left out in the discussions. We are key, and this is why it's having an impact on working families. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Omar. A key message that national ownership is critical, but for it to become a reality, we also need mechanisms like the Global Fund to provide that leverage to secure that ownership. Thank you very much. Dolline, any passing word from your side, please?
Yes, I just want to emphasize the fact that the disruption by COVID-19 has really is something to really take into consideration, because there are diversions of budgets now to a lot of budgets are being diverted to COVID or political engagements like in Kenya right now. And these budgets are normally the kind of budgets that are set apart for the marginalized group. So there needs to be a lot of vigilance in terms of taking a rights-based approach and being familiar with the human rights policies so that we use them and hold the governments responsible for, in order to be able to cope up with this shift in the priorities. So that is something that I'm just emphasizing, that health should be seen in the time in terms of being a right to humanity. Sorry about that. I didn't show my face.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We're reminded that we have come to the close of our session. There've been no questions, but there's been some very important links in the chat, so please look at that. Thank you, Nicola, for putting in the report on the Global Fund. So on that, we express our deepest thanks and appreciating to Valerie and all the other presenters, Dolline, Omar, Ara, for your wonderful presentation, for your time, and for just helping us to remind us of the importance of the momentum that social protection has now gained out of COVID to sustain it further to the higher ground. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Gabriel.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.